Hi everyone, I'm Haley Lichteen. I'm a content creator and digital strategist, and I'll be your MC tonight. On behalf of Courier, thank you all for coming out tonight. I just want to take a moment before we get started to thank our sponsors, Grassroots Analytics, People First, and The Bench, whose support made this night possible. If you're not familiar with Courier already, they are one of the fastest growing pro-democracy news networks in the country. And tonight we're going to have the opportunity to hear from people who are redefining what talking to leadership and voters look like in America. Next up, we have a keynote conversation on a topic that seems to be on everybody's mind lately, how New York's political battles connect to the future of our country. Please welcome our moderator, Alan Piper, a Courier correspondent who previously led political coverage for Now This, and Chi Ossé, a council member representing the 36th district in New York City. He is the youngest council member and a Gen Z, digitally native politician turned influencer. He's risen to prominence in part due to his engaging and informative social media content, including his highly viewed series, Why Shit Not Working.
Can we hear some more applause for Haley?
Thank you so much for that introduction. Influencer. I'll take it. Come with me to the hottest event in town tonight.
Well, Chi, thank you so much for taking the time to be here this evening. Your viral videos are just so impressive, and they are something that we at Courier it's just close to our heart to have people who are able to communicate about politics so well and so accessibly through video. Do you feel that your messaging style is something that is specific to you or specific to New York? Or are there lessons that you think that progressives can learn nationwide from what you're doing?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because I find it to be a mix of both, right? I grew up using the internet, was on social media at a young age, maybe too young, and my parents would probably be mad at that. But I would say the internet is, another language that I speak. And as I started going into the industry of politics, I found that it was an extremely useful tool to communicate with my constituents and communicate to people who usually feel disengaged by politics, most especially local politics. So as I progressed throughout my career of being in the city council, I continued finding my voice online, not only as a social media user, but as an elected official using social media. And people really responded well to it, whether it was the authenticity, the way I broke things down, or the simple fact that an elected official was speaking to them with transparency through applications that they use on a daily basis. In the way that I think that this can be replicated across the country and within various different levels of government, I think every elected official, most elected officials have their own voice, and I think they need to tap into that voice and utilize social media to highlight something that makes them, right? I find American politics to be very closely akin to pageantry, for better and for worse, and social media is sometimes a way that highlights that, but also keeps people engaged, organizes people, and turns them out to the polls as well.
And one of the things that works for you is that you are keenly tied into the specific issues that your constituents are interested in.
Yeah.
Major issue for all New Yorkers and increasingly Americans nationwide is housing affordability. Yeah. How do we make housing more affordable in both New York and the rest of the nation?
Yeah, absolutely. This is, I'm sure we're all hearing about abundance and, Ezra Klein on social media and within the various different circles that we're in. And in many ways, I agree with, a lot of the sentiments that come from abundance. We need to build more housing here in New York City. We have a housing shortage. While we're seeing, jobs increase year after year after year, our housing supply continues to drop. I think our vacancy rate is at 1.4%. That's a historical low. We need to build more homes. We need to build affordable homes. We need to build homes in every single parts of this city so that we're not only making room for people who, no matter what, are going to move to New York City, but so that it stabilizes the pressure that's being put on our skyrocketing rents. In addition to that, we need universal rent stabilization. I've been advocating for good cause. I'm so happy a form of it exists here in New York State. I support our soon-to-be mayor Zohran Mamdani's plan to freeze rent. My answer to the housing crisis within New York City and more broadly the United States of America is yes and, right? I find that many people within this debate of housing, say it's one way or another way. Maybe we want to build more, but no, rent control and rent stabilization. I think we need all of it, and we need to be, making a dent everywhere within our housing crisis. And we need to ban forced broker fees, which we've done here in New York City.
Thanks to you.
Yeah.
Yes?
We did it.
Now, one of the issues that conservatives have been most successful in weaponizing is fear of crime.
Yeah.
It is the pretense that Trump is using for his military incursions into U.S. cities, and it is sure to be a major issue in this year's mayoral election. How should Democrats talk about crime in a way that cuts through the fear-mongering but also respects the very real concerns that Americans have for public safety?
Absolutely, and this is a issue that I hear from my constituents on a daily basis. Everyone deserves to feel safe within their city, within their home. Over my past 4 years in being in the city council, I've had to work with many of my police precincts, and a lot of the issues that they raise to me, are these issues of mental illness and mental crises that people go through, and they say themselves that they don't want to be responsible for some of these issues that maybe professionals who know to deal with people dealing with a mental crisis are able to deal with. And I want to highlight that because I think that's something that is lost in the conversation about handling public safety. A lot of the incidents that we see when it comes to crime in the city and sometimes in this country stem from the mental health crisis that exists, and even our own police officers are acknowledging that they may handle some types of crimes, but these other types of mental illness crises that happen across our city and country need real professionals to deal with it. So I've been super excited to support Zoran and his plan to create community safety teams across the city, another agency that will tend to some of these mental health crises within our city. I think this model should, when it is established in New York, should be, pushed through in the rest of the country. But I also do want to acknowledge that, New York City is also the safest big city in America. While people do talk about crime through the lens of fear-mongering, it's also our job as elected officials, as people who work in various different types of media, to not add to those flames of fear-mongering, which may add to making people feel unsafe. So we have to communicate really well that things are working in this city in some ways when it comes to public safety, but there's also more room to grow and improve.
Now, an issue that's very close to my heart, you were one of only 11 council members to vote against an unpopular plan to demap streets in Coney Island's historic amusement district to make way for a casino.
Yeah.
Why was it so much easier for you to side with the community against the casino lobby than it seemed to be for so many of your colleagues?
Yeah, I mean, you're putting me on a... I love all my colleagues. No, I love Coney Island, but at the same time, I don't see New York City as being a place for casinos. I think we have enough issues here. I think we can leave casinos in Atlantic City and no shade to Jersey, but I think they could. They can deal with the casinos. No, I think there are. Coney Island is such an amazing landmark to New York. I would hate to see it infringed upon with casinos. I think there are problems that stem from casinos sometimes, the addiction, issues that pertain to that. I voted against every single other casino project that has approached my desk in the city council. I'm just not supportive of them. And I hope other colleagues of mine feel the same way, but only 10 others of them do. So.
Well, as a lover of Coney Island, I have to thank you for that vote.
Have you ridden the Cyclone this past season?
Oh, absolutely.
I do it every season. Have you ridden the new rides that are over there?
Yes, the Phoenix.
The Phoenix is great.
The Phoenix is extraordinary.
All of you go and support Coney Island. I think the season's still ongoing.
Yes, as long as the weather is good, the parks stay open on the weekends, generally through the end of October, and you can take part in a piece of New York history, ride the Cyclone, the Wonder Wheel, which...
They don't have Shoot the Freak anymore, though, because of woke, so...
No. Now, you are the youngest new elected New York official, and we seem to be at potentially a moment of generational shift within the Democratic Party. What's your take on the old guard of New York politics? And with Congressman Nadler stepping aside and other incumbents vulnerable, what are your hopes or fears for 2026?
Sure. I think Congressman Nadler, I think, did a very bold thing that I think many members of Congress don't do, and that's acknowledging that he did his work and his time is up, right? When it comes to his career. And I think many other Congress members and members of Congress who are especially afraid of the change that is coming to this party, the good change that is coming to this party, should step aside and let others fill those spaces. Now that's my political answer. The real answer is many of them are extremely embarrassing. Many of our leaders of this party, Senator Chuck Schumer, Senator Gillibrand, are extremely disappointing in terms of how they're pushing back against Trump Part 2. In terms of how they're not supporting, Zoran Mamdani. I mean, it's ridiculous seeing how out of touch they are with the people of New York City and with the change of the Democratic Party. There's numerous issues where they are on the right of to where the larger party is. And we're going to continue losing races from federal to state to the local level if we have these individuals who are unafraid of taking our country back. And if they're not going to take our country back, they need to go.
And you touched on the reluctance of a lot of members of the Democratic establishment to embrace Mamdani. Since Trump's 2020 big lie, Democrats have made it the cornerstone of their party that we should respect elections. Yeah. How does it damage the Democratic brand if leaders of the party refuse to acknowledge the results of a free and fair election that Mamdani won by a considerable margin for the primary?
Yeah, I think it highlights an issue that so many people have had with the Democratic Party, including many Democrats, including people who have left the party, and that they're tired of a party that's full of shit, right? If you're going to say blue no matter who, in 2016 and blue no matter who in 2020 and blue no matter who in 2024, and then when it comes to 2025 and we have this extremely exciting, inspirational, figure who is galvanizing young people in the first major election post-Trump, and you refuse to endorse him for unknown reasons. Maybe those reasons are green and put money within your coffers. I think it highlights the fact that there's a lot of embarrassing figures within the party, and I'm extremely disappointed to see that there's some reluctancy in supporting our mayoral nominee. I think things are going to change soon, though.
I'm struck when people make arguments that, if Mamdani taxes the rich will leave New York. We were just talking about Coney Island and the wonderful rides. Yeah. New York has so many wonderful things. Yeah. What New Yorker, is it really realistic to think that people would choose to leave the greatest city in the world just because they might pay a few more dollars in taxes?
It's baloney. I think. And when you listen to Zoran and when you listen to a lot of what the left is calling for when it comes to taxing the rich, one of the calls is matching New York's corporate tax to the same that New Jersey's corporate tax is. New Jersey has a lower corporate tax than New York's does, right? And I think we should replicate what some of these other states are doing. It's not that outrageous to mimic what some of our neighbors are doing in order to make the city as affordable as possible and to fund many of our public goods. And not only that, but it's widely popular, right? As I said before, a lot of our representatives are further to the right on issues where we as a party here in New York State and New York City, want them to be further left on. And that includes taxing the rich, making the rich pay their fair share. People really want to fight the oligarchy, and we need to fight the oligarchy right here at home in New York, too.
Now, Trump reportedly is considering offering a spot in his administration to Mayor Adams to get him out of the race so that supposedly it would be easier for Cuomo to win.
Yeah.
Why do you think Trump wants to see Cuomo win, and will that backfire?
Well, first and foremost, Trump, hate Trump, but he is a comedian, and I think he really missed out on an opportunity to not offer Adams an appointment to be ambassador of Turkey, and it's ridiculous that, he didn't do he did Saudi Arabia, and I think that's why, Adams didn't accept it, but I think Cuomo and Trump have a very close relationship, as he does with Adams. It's funny because the only person that Trump doesn't really like on the opposition side of Mamdani is the actual Republican, that is Curtis Sliwa. But I think Trump wants a puppet here in New York City, as he did with Adams. I think he sees that the writing's on the wall when it comes to Eric's chances of winning re-election. Eric is consistently polling under 10%, which is so embarrassing, being the incumbent in the race. I think he sees a path to victory for Cuomo, but also Cuomo's asking Trump for help. And I think that should be a warning sign to every single New Yorker who is maybe on the edge of voting for Mamdani or someone else in November, but also fearful of this hostile government from Washington, is that Cuomo will be a collaborator with Donald Trump, and many of the horrors that we're seeing stem from this federal government will be brought back home with a mayor who is working for a fascist.
Now, what would you say to people who are concerned that Mamdani might not have the experience to govern a city that is larger than many nations?
Yeah, I think that's ridiculous. I mean, in terms of how he's already galvanized and reinvigorated the spirit and life of the Democratic Party is something that I applaud him enough on in terms of being the next mayor of our city. Many of the initiatives that Zoran has accomplished, even in the state assembly, in terms of piloting free buses, which everyone said was impossible, is magnificent. So many elected officials who are in office for multiple 8 terms are not accomplishing things of that nature. So I think that's just people said that to me in terms of me not having enough experience to become a city council member, and I think it's an argument that always falls short when we do get elected and accomplish some greatness.
And Mamdani has a very bold set of proposals. Mm-hmm. Some people are skeptical about the ability to implement them. How do you see him implementing the ideas that he wants to bring to New York?
Absolutely. So, I mean, a rent freeze he'll be able to do. De Blasio did it multiple times, and I'm sure that many New Yorkers are going to be very happy to see that their rent-stabilized apartments will be frozen, and that's something that's certainly under his power. I think a lot of some of his other proposals that may need some state assistance, I think the amount of support that Zoran has built over this past campaign, as well as the relationships that he's built on since his victory, will aid him in showing the governor and showing the state government that there is a mandate and there's a desire that New Yorkers want, and seeing his platform and his ideals push past the finish line. And I do believe that those relationships between him and Governor Hochul will yield to some positive results on what he ran on in this past primary.
Now, in terms of city policy that the rest of the nation can learn from, you've described the Living Future package of city legislation as, quote, municipal solutions to national problems. Mm-hmm. What would the package do for New York, and how can the rest of the country learn from it?
Absolutely. So, I think I'm certainly trying to gear my attention on multiple bills that can Trump-proof or fortify New York City and New York State. And in this package, there are some bills that I'm very excited about. There's a bill that would codify and grow New York City's Green New Deal program on making more of our buildings 100% renewable. There's another bill that would create more community land trusts that will allow people and nonprofits to purchase land to create more affordable housing. Including in this package will create and protect rights for trans New Yorkers, especially those trans folks who are in custody. I think there's multiple bills within this package that will make New York livable and show that a blue city can truly govern by making it affordable, by making it clean, and protecting some of the most vulnerable New Yorkers that exist here.
Now, in terms of protecting the most vulnerable New Yorkers, why is the LGBTQ community, and trans people most specifically, in such danger at this particular moment, and how do Democrats need to respond to meet the moment?
Sure, I think we can speak about many of the rollbacks that this government is doing to trans healthcare. We can speak about the defunding of various different services that support the trans community across this country. But I think the most insidious act that is coming from this government and from the right is the othering of trans people, describing them as monsters, describing them as inhuman. It's evil, it's insidious, and it's despicable. And we need to humanize people. People who are different than us, people who are marginalized, people who are killed every single day across this country. And that's why we need to make New York a very safe place for our trans siblings. I think the response to many of the lies that are placed on trans people is turning, and pointing the finger on who the actual culprits are, right? I believe trans people make up 0.01% of America's population when, the actual 1% of billionaires and many millionaires are raising the taxes for working class New Yorkers, right? It's not trans people that are making the lives of Americans unaffordable. It's the oligarchy. It's the billionaires that are spending money to ruin our government and who got Trump elected.
Now, New York has been on a list of cities that Trump has floated the idea of sending troops into. How do we protect the civil rights of New Yorkers in the event that Trump decides to deploy the military here in our city?
Absolutely, and I just had a conversation with our governor last week about this, and I think that's one of the first things we need to be doing is holding our governor accountable, right? Making sure that she's standing up to Trump and also feeling empowered to do so, right? In many of the ways that Trump has tried to infringe on our rights or our legislation here in New York, whether it was congestion pricing or even this National Guard situation, when our governor puts her foot down and says that's not going to happen, we realize that it's just another Trump bluff. So I think that's our first line of defense. In addition to that, we need to fortify our rights here in New York. So I think completely identifying the rights that protect immigrant New Yorkers and reinforcing our sanctuary city laws to prevent these illegal kidnappings from happening on our streets is one of the first things that we need to be doing. In addition to that, I have a bill that I'm trying to pass in the city council that bans the NYPD and militarized police forces from infringing on our First Amendment rights and protests that take place within the city. A lot of our protests that happen are just us acting on our First Amendment rights and pushing back and creating legislation that would codify our protection to do that within the city of New York. We'll push back against this National Guard that Trump is threatening to put on or enforce within our city. So reinforcing our governor's support and pushing back against Trump, and then passing this bill of mine that would codify and reduce the amount of officers that infringe upon our First Amendment rights to assemble.
Now, in a video about that bill, you highlighted that the unit of the NYPD that is most likely to respond to protests against this administration is a unit that is focused on anti-terrorist activities. Are we being made to be made out as terrorists if we don't support this administration?
I think that's what they're trying to say, and I don't believe that's legal. And I think it's my responsibility, my colleagues' responsibility to continue calling that out and to pass legislation that will protect us against that destructive language and also destructive acts that can come from the NYPD Strategic Response Group.
Now, for this bill that you're trying to pass, it has to pass the city council. We have a lot of New Yorkers here in the audience who have council members who may not be you. We have New Yorkers watching potentially on video, who have council members who aren't you. Can they call their council members and encourage them to support the bill? And what is it called?
It's called the CURB Act. So please go to the link in my bio, and it will show you how to call your council member, send them an email, and ask them to support this bill so that we can protect our First Amendment rights here in New York City.
Okay. Now, this is more of a New York State issue,
Sure.
but it involves New Yorkers. We know that Texas, Missouri, and Ohio, and possibly Florida and Indiana, are redrawing their congressional districts mid-cycle to try to rig the midterms. First of all, can New York respond in kind? Because we have guardrails against partisan gerrymandering, and should we respond in kind?
Yeah, I mean, you just answered that question, right? We shot ourselves in the foot, a couple of years ago when we passed a constitutional amendment to restrict gerrymandering here in New York State, and that was done with good intentions, right? I think that was done with the Michelle Obama era politics of when they go low, we go high, and I think I am a part of a different politics now of when they go low, we dig for oil, as someone who's going to prison in Adams's campaign has once said. But I wish we didn't do that, but we still have an opportunity to lift that constitutional amendment. It would take 2 legislative sessions within the New York State, Senate and Assembly in order for that to happen. So that would, the earliest that would happen, I think, is 2027. We should definitely start that process, but even though it might take some time for that to happen, we need to be doing a myriad of other things to reinforce our protections within New York City, and to make sure that we're prepared for midterms, and that's making the city as livable as possible. That's following the mandate that was set this past primary by taxing the rich. That's reinvesting within our homes and universal rent stabilization, and many other things that I spoke about during this conversation. But we need to make our state and city as livable as possible so that people feel good about blue governance when they're going into the midterms and voting out Republicans next year.
And so it's crucial for all New Yorkers who care about these issues to be registered and to vote in the mayoral election. Is that correct?
Yes, in every election.
Yes, but particularly in the upcoming mayoral election. What do you have to say to people who might be on the fence?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks who I have this conversation with say that they're not interested in politics or don't care about politics. And I always tell them that the people who do care about politics are collecting your rent check every single month, right? And if you're sick and tired of seeing your rent go up, every single year or every single month, then you need to be voting. And you need to be voting in municipal elections, especially when a new mayor is on the ballot.
Okay. Well, the last thing I want to ask you is, where can people find you online? Where should people be following you?
Yeah, I'm very visible online. I'm on Instagram at Chi Ossé, TikTok at Chi4NYC, and Twitter at Ossé Chi. I still use Twitter, I'm sorry. I use Blue Sky too, but it's a little soft over there.
Well,
no shade to Blue Sky.
You should be following the council.
Fuck Elon Musk. I'm sorry.
You should be following the council member everywhere, but especially on Instagram and TikTok because the videos are outstanding. I'm Alan Piper. You can follow me on most social media platforms at apiper13, except for TikTok, where I am Piperama. Council member, thank you so much for making the time to talk with us today.
Thank you for having me. It was so nice to be here. Thank you.
How many of you have found yourself asking in the past year or so, how can we break down the current structures that exist and build things that actually work? Love the energy. Well, this next group of panelists are doing exactly just that. They are a group of dynamic digital strategists and online voices who are building real power in organizing their communities both on the ground and in real life. So join me in welcoming Anderson Clayton, chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party, Keith Edwards, host of The Keith Edwards Show, Patrick Stevenson, the former senior advisor for digital strategy at the Biden White House. We're all tangled up here. Victor Shi, the new media deputy for the LA Mayor's Office. And your incredible moderator, Amanda Littman, the co-founder and president of Run for Something.
Hi. Okay, we're just gonna see what comes out of my mouth here. I want to start with Anderson. So Anderson, as a party chair, you are part of a top-down structure, kind of. And the word grassroots gets thrown around a lot when we're talking about like establishment voices in top-down structures. I want to know how you define grassroots organizing in this new era of democratic politics.
I consider the grassroots as a party chair people that are actively organizing in their backyard, which means if you're the person that's organizing the protest in your county, if you're the person that's organizing the canvas launch, if you're helping local candidates and educating people about getting to county commissioner meetings and city council meetings right now, you are the person that I look to on the ground to tell me where this party should be operating and how we should be expanding our outreach in communities. Because I do believe that the grassroots needs to be more respected in the conversations that were happening right now at the national level for what we need to see from a party that is supposed to be fighting back against a fascist administration. And so I truly value the work of my activists and my organizers, and I look to them to also be the people that I recruit into county party leadership roles, because oftentimes if you're the person on the ground organizing like that, you need to be the one doing it for the party too. And so encouraging folks to be part of that organization.
Keith, I want to connect this to something we were talking about briefly before in the green room, about how I was pushing a little bit on whether there was actually pushback within the party on new media voices. It's like, tell me what that looks like. And your point, just to summarize very briefly, is like there is, especially among elected officials who can't hang or staff who are afraid. And there's a disconnect there between how voters feel and how the people feel about new media voices, where they very much trust you. Which I think to Anderson's point is the distinction between grassroots and sort of the establishment people at the top. How do you think about your role situated between the establishment voices and the democratic people who actually make up the party?
Well, it's certainly changed as I've gotten more subscribers, where I feel like I was just trying to amplify good work. But I think when I get I think 30,000 to 50,000 comments a week, too many to read. But the overwhelming sentiment is that people really trust me with what I'm telling them. And I take that as a huge responsibility. So I don't think my responsibility is to the elected official. And I think there's other creators who would think it is. But to me, my job is to condense the truth in a way that people can understand. And so I'm in search of the truth. And so I think that would be scary for a politician who doesn't want to share the truth.
I've been on sort of both ends as both a podcast host, but also now sort of a lot of my job is getting the mayor on different podcasts and YouTube shows. And something that, I mean, to your point, I think the medium itself is really unique. And I think that there has to be an understanding among sort of all staff and elected officials of like how a podcast or like YouTube show is different from an MSNBC type or like traditional media. It's just the ways that you communicate on those platforms is different. And that's something that I've been working with a lot. And I think it's an ongoing struggle with like how we approach new media.
Yes, I actually talk about myself a lot on my show. And that doesn't happen a lot on MSNBC and CNN. And I actually had a politician come on my show and say, wow, you talk about yourself a lot. I was like, yeah, that's the point. You know, so I do think there is like this disconnect between what politicians expect from traditional news sources versus new media.
Patrick, I'm curious for your work from when you were in the White House, what the learning curve there was like for the other staff that you sort of had to bring along with you as you made the case for reaching out to creators, new media, and that kind of thing.
So I like that you framed that like I'm the smart staffer and everyone else I worked with, I needed to educate this, but I'll tell you a version of it where I was the stupid staffer. My job at the White House was I interfaced with all digital creators and like making sure we were bringing in the right people for podcasts with President Biden, but also inviting the right people like Keith to come to like briefings for State of the Union and all that. And everyone you work with, you have to pass through like very rigorous White House vetting. Like if you have a DUI in 2005 in North Carolina, we absolutely track that, and like we're making a decision about whether or not to invite you or not, which is deeply hilarious to think about that in the context of who's getting invited to the White House now. But like, so we're doing this, and in my head, I develop a notion at some point that like we're doing creators we work with a favor, because it's like, and I actually would tell this to people. I'd be like, well, but creators who come here, we're conferring a lot of brand safety on them. So they're able to go to like other brands they work with and be like, I passed White House vet, or like, here's a photo of me with Joe Biden. I must not be that crazy of a person if I got there. And like, I remember telling this to a creator I worked with, and they were like, oh, I'm losing hundreds of thousands of dollars because I'm here right now on like other brand opportunities, because like the creator, you've turned, especially when you're working with a non-political creator, you're turning them into a political creator, right? And like, they can't then at that point go out and get a Father's Day deal with a grill company, because the grill company doesn't want to accidentally be the woke grill company or something like that. So I think like a big thing I've confronted, and like, I'm advising some creators on like how to integrate with politics now. And like, one of the things I see be a major misconception among people that do this on elected officials is like, the idea that like any elected official is doing a favor for a creator by engaging with them is like insane. It's just totally insane, and it's like absolutely a thing that we need to like purge from the party and get on the level of like, no, these creators are doing you a favor by letting you go on their YouTube channel.
I see a lot of nodding. Victor, I'm curious for your experience. You mentioned having straddled both the creator side and the institution side inside the LA mayor's office. How have you navigated that in this new role? Like, how have you felt that personal transition?
I think for me, it's being sort of honest about sort of like where we are in terms of our media ecosystem with a lot of people who are, especially I think at sort of the local level, I think people get really enamored by sort of like local press and traditional press. I think there's an important role for that in local offices. But at the same time, it's like there's so much information now. And I mean, one example is I joined the mayor's office a little bit after the fires started. And I don't know how many of you guys sort of followed right after the LA fires, but there was a lot of just misinformation, just like fire hose of lies from the right, and like the sort of way that you respond traditionally would be, to do something on like KTLA or with LA Times. And sort of like my role in that sort of process was like, let's think beyond that and sort of how we can reach people and tell them the facts and the narratives that actually sort of are truthful. And so I think being honest about those different types of sort of, I guess, new ways of engaging audiences is important.
Anderson, in North Carolina specifically, how do you advise candidates and the party leaders that you're working with about navigating the creator ecosystem? Do you think about it nationally, locally, state-based? Is it something you talk about with your folks at all? How do you think about it?
I think it's important to be on every medium right now if you can as a politician. And I honestly heard somebody talk about it earlier, of that somebody, I honestly think it was you, Keith, that was like, somebody would go on a show if they had 30 people on it, or 30 followers, or 300,000 followers, it doesn't matter. And that's sort of the approach I've taken in North Carolina, because we have a lot of local folks who have started up, like there's a podcast out of Union County that's got about 300 people that listen to it. And I'm like, those are 300 people that are not listening to me as a party chair on a regular day basis, but they're listening to the person in their local community that's giving them information and giving them advice. And in rural North Carolina, we have the second highest rural population than any other state in the country other than Texas right now in my state. And so local media, to Victor's point, it still does matter, because if you've got a local rural newspaper out there, you're clinging on for dear life, but the people that are in that community are also still reading that newspaper. It's how they get information. And so you have to be, I think, adaptable at every level. And it also means that I am chasing, there's a creator, and honestly, I'm gonna shout her out, Vidya, who's in North Carolina right now. She's got about 4.2 million followers on TikTok. And I know that she went to a Kamala Harris event this last year, and I am trying to get her to engage with the North Carolina Democratic Party right now, because I'm like, look, I want to make sure that we're still reaching the national audiences that we had from the campaign, because typically what we see when you have a presidential or even a midterm election, right, you kind of see that infrastructure fade away after a candidate or a campaign is no longer active. And I'm like, the state party is the best place to keep that relationship going, and also really investing in those relationships. And so I'm trying like crazy to make sure that we're still building the relationships for the federal races that we need, but also looking to more folks that may not have large followings, but they've got followings in their communities and they're people that folks listen to. Because that's genuinely what I care about, is who is listening to somebody right now, and do you value their voice in your community, and who are those people? And so media mapping the state of North Carolina has been really important for us, both with podcast and non-traditional ways of media, but also looking at traditional media too. Where does it have an impact? Where does it have a footprint? And do we have somebody in all 100 counties in North Carolina that are pushing out information to their folks?
Okay, the obvious answer to the question I'm about to ask is we just need 49 other Anderson Claytons all across the country. But I'm curious, from Keith, Patrick, and Victor, if you were going to change the staffing structures or the internal operations of the party or a candidate's office or elected's office or the DNC, pick institution you'd like, how would you reconfigure it or restructure it to solve for this problem of people not trusting new media voices?
Well, I think it's happening slowly, but I think we need staffers who are comm staffers, but just for new media. I think that is probably the first change that needs to happen. I think right now it's in the digital silo. It doesn't exist there. It shouldn't exist there. It should be in the comms silo, and there should be someone just focused on new media.
That's how Trump does it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's how the Trump White House set it up. Like, they don't really have a digital team. They just have people on their comms team that do it. So, whereas like we had a separate digital department for Biden, and like there are pros and cons to that. Thank you. Keith, you're great at helping people talk on mic. No, it's good. I think so the easy answer to this question that doesn't mean anything is like just increase the party's risk tolerance, and like it doesn't actually matter if you have that bad of a clip on something, because like just do 10 more things and people won't focus on the bad clip. That's the easy thing to say, because like preaching to the choir, like who are we going to go tell that to? Like major elected officials? I think maybe the more challenging answer to give, and I'm specifically giving it to this room, is like, I think I would ask everyone here to like evaluate your own personal political capital and standing, and like I'd think about how to spend that a little more aggressively to move that ball forward yourself. And so to be more concrete about that, if you work in an office or for a politician, like go take a risk and you might get yelled at, and I promise you like it won't be that bad, you know? I mean, like, yeah, getting yelled at is bad, but like it probably won't set your career back, and like you'll accomplish a good thing that will like help you professionally. And I think too many people kind of do the thing where they're like, my boss should be more permissive of me taking risks, and if this podcast goes a little sideways and there's one negative clip off of it, they should just be chill about that. But I think like we all have a responsibility to like personally take a bit more risks there. And part of that too is like, if you find yourself and you're working for a not very good candidate on this, like go work for a better candidate on that. And like truly, like easier said than done, I realize, but like be critical of that and how you're constructing your career there.
We have thousands of Run for Something candidates that would love to hire you.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to what all three of you said, but doing an MSNBC clip, CNN clip, that's like 5, 6, 7 minutes, and doing an hour-long podcast or YouTube show gives a lot of staffers a hernia, but also gives a lot of politicians like know how to operate in that space. So just really preparing candidates, I think, for that, and like how to have a conversation that's beyond like talking points and sounds like you're human, I think is something to consider for staffers too.
Or we could just run people that are humans.
Yes.
I'll be honest, like I hear it all the time, and I'm like, I have no problem going on a podcast or being on MSNBC, and I have done both. And like, I think it is getting people in office that can also, I do not negate anything that anybody up here has said, but it just in the sense of like, we need people that are authentically themselves, that are not afraid to talk like a human being does to people in their communities right now, and also helping that message seep down, which I don't think that enough people are taking into consideration. I think that Democrats feel like we have to be perfect and polished and have the right answer all the time. And I'm like, no human has got the right answer all the time. Like we are each and every single one of us, I think, trying to figure out what is the best way to respond to natural disasters right now, the way that the world is collapsing around us right now, and the ability to say, I'm scared as you are too, but I know that together we can fight our way out of this, and here's how we do that, is a much better message than flailing in that in some sense. And I feel like that's to me, that's what I feel like is missing the most right now, is being able to do all of the above. And I think that if we get different people in positions of power, they're going to be able to do that, honestly.
Runforwhat.net. For you, love it, where you can run. I actually do think you bring up a really interesting point, Anderson, which is how much of the problem is staff or consultants or donors, and how much is the people? Is it just that we don't have the right raw ingredients?
I mean, I think it's like something that I have really tried to do as a party chair is level the playing field for how to run for office. And Amanda, I know that you have done this too and run for something, because I think that the people, honestly, that should be in positions of power right now cannot figure out the ways to get there. The folks that would be our best spokespeople, they don't know necessarily how to go run for office for the first time. And it is so important for us as a party to be the place that levels the playing field for how do you do that. And so North Carolina, we're the only state in the country right now that I know of that gives out Vote Builder Access, which is our database, for free to every single candidate that runs for office, even if you're primarying an incumbent in the state right now. Because I'm like, nobody should be restricted in the access for data for a party. We should be democratizing data. We should be trying to implement it and emphasize how do you access that more as a candidate and training people on how to do it. We make your website, we'll make a logo for you for free as the state party. So if you're like, I don't know how to create any of this, it costs me $400 to do it and I can't, I'm like, great, the state party in North Carolina will do that for you. And it is, to me, leveling the ability for people that would make really good public servants, right? Because we don't want more politicians in office right now, to be honest with y'all. I want people that actually want to do the jobs that they're there to do, which is serve the people that you are supposed to represent. And newsflash to everybody in this audience that knows that, right? It ain't an easy job. Being in office right now, you can ask Chi Ossé, I'm sure, but he'll be like, it is not easy to make an appeal to everybody in this country, but I think there is a way for us to be able to speak to communities and also get people in office that can do that easier than what we've done so far. And that means we have got to equalize and make a fairer playing field for anybody that wants to run for office right now.
Keith, I'm wondering, the politicians and electeds who have succeeded or thrived when they've entered your shows, your platform, what are they doing right, and what are the ones who are failing or struggle more? What are they doing wrong?
I think the ones who do it right just show up, and it may be easier said than done, I don't know, but they just show up as themselves. And they're not giving talking points. I can hear them reading the talking points in their head when they're saying it to me. Yeah. And so, and there's no need for that. I say like and all the time. Audiences are actually quite forgiving. If you show up, you talk about how you feel, why something's important to you, if you can explain something in a way that is tangible, audiences are actually very rewarding to people who can show up in those spaces and be, I guess, for lack of a better word, authentic. And if it's lacking, then I think that's just a good point to put in your head, that maybe some politicians were good for the last 30 years, but maybe we need new ones.
Patrick, I know in your role right now, you're working with creators quite a bit. For the staff in the room, or the digital staff, comm staff who are doing so, what's your advice to them if they want to engage with creators? Like literally, how does one do this?
What a great question. Honestly, I'd be more curious in your answer to this, Keith, but my answer is know who they are, right? I feel like there's Keith goes on YouTube and talks for 25 minutes a day, and I think a lot of the people that reach out to him have never watched any of that content before, but it's available for free on your phone, and you could just do a basic amount of research to figure out oh, he's the right person to talk to about this type of thing, and it's just frankly some legwork on it. I also think if you're good at this too, and you know the candidate you work for, the organization you work for, you will have a good sense of who's a good fit for people. I'll just give you the example with Biden. He was very good at leadership stuff because he served in office for 50 years, and he could talk a lot about being president. We found out one of the best forums for him was going on Simon Sinek's podcast, right? And that was a really authentic place for him to go. I think everyone has something they're good at, right? And the thing about the internet is there's so many niches and so many niche content creators. Figure out what niche your candidate can authentically talk to, go find that and go explore that more. But I am curious, in your experience, how is best to work with you from a staff perspective?
Well, I think that's why it's important to have staffers who are specifically engaged in new media, because there are some staffers that I just know. To your point, we just need people who understand the landscape and know what the best method is to get into or to speak with an individual person who creates.
Victor, I'm wondering, from your role now in the mayor's office, how do you operationalize this? Like, do you create briefings? Do you like run ideas of creators by, like, how does that work for you?
Yeah, I think doing the research is really important. So knowing, like Patrick said, sort of like what your politician's sort of niche is and what they're good at, and finding the right shows to match that is really important. But something that I've really tried to do in sort of the local office is being intentional about creating that time every week for podcasts or YouTube shows. And like we sometimes do longer form ones depending on what the schedule is. But I think institutionalizing and making it intentional every single week, like we're going to devote X amount of time for new media is important. But then also I think treating, you know, podcasters, YouTubers, creators with the respect that they deserve. I think oftentimes, you know, people just think that they're entertaining people or they're not serious like journalists, but they're actually really serious. So treating them with that level of respect is also important.
Anderson, one of the things I think you do so well, among many things, is that you yourself kind of function as a creator and a personality online, along with your work as the state party chair. I'm wondering how you straddle that yourself.
I'll be honest, I think that I could do a lot better of a job of posting on the internet right now. The thing that I think people critique me for the most is that we're not posting enough on TikTok as we are, but what I've tried to do is give people a glimpse of what it's like to be a state party chair, because I think that it's a role that not a lot of people typically know that much about. We still have the title of being the youngest state party chair in the country, and unfortunately no one's come to take that yet from us. And so it's also been a place of how people find me through that, of that they're engaging because I'm young, honestly, in politics. That was a lot of the ways in which I got my first donors, to be honest with y'all, is that people were like, damn, a fresh face. We don't see that often in the Democratic Party, you know, especially in leadership roles. And I think it's trying to bring more people in and tell the story of how I got here, because it encourages more people to run for office and to also see themselves in the party when they're like, you could be somebody that's not an establishment pick and still win an office and come into it and be able to show people what it means to build a different type of a party. But I think that I still struggle with that too, just to be honest, about the time that it takes for me to fundraise. Like we have an operational budget that I am in charge of and everything else. So I'm a face, but I'm a fundraiser. And to me, the priority has got to be a fundraiser first, a face second in so many senses, because we have North Carolina, fun fact for everybody in this room, because I'm just proud of it. I'm like, we're the largest state party in the South right now. We have 24 full-time staffers that are on with us. And that is because of people in this room that I see right now who have been gracious enough to give me their money and their time and their energy and have helped us be able to do that. But it means something to me to be able to keep year-round organizers on. So we want to be a party that shows up year-round. We don't just want to be in communities 6 months before an election. And how do you do that? It is through building year-round infrastructure in a state party that looks like what we're doing. And we modeled that off of a Wisconsin Democratic Party and a Michigan Democratic Party that had so much successes previously to us about making sure that there were community or people in communities year-round and not just a couple of months before an election, right? So that's sort of how I try to balance it, but I know I can do better for just the folks in this room that may be watching my social media that also might have that critique.
And for my last question for each of you, we're going to do a rapid fire. I want to hear one creator that people in this room may not know about or think about or like look to that you recommend, and one either elected or org who you think is doing this well.
Okay, Hometown Holler in North Carolina is one of my favorite podcasts, favorite creators. They have genuinely absolutely no money right now in their life, but they still have 60,000 followers, and they've made a really good niche in North Carolina to be so good at what they're doing. And then Theodore Nollert is one of my city councilors. He got elected in Chapel Hill when I first got elected in 2023, and he was originally somebody that looked at me and was like, I'm gonna try to get a young person to run for office. And I looked at him and I was like, Theo, my dude, why don't you just run instead? Like, why are you trying to go get somebody when you just wanna be the one that does it? And he ended up winning that race, and he has really taken on the fight for housing policy and trying to push our party more on affordable housing and what that can look like, especially in communities where you have NIMBYs that are in them right now. And I think that that's really important too for how does our party talk about progressivism and housing policies in a state like North Carolina that most people would still say, you're a red red state. Like, why are you talking like that in some circumstances? And Theo is taking on the challenge right now of educating populations across our state about it. And so Hometown Holler and Theodore Noller, if y'all have follows after this.
I think Motherhood for Good in Wisconsin is killing it. She's a mother doing good in Wisconsin. And I also think Mallory McMorrow out of Michigan is crushing social and makes me very excited about the future of the party.
Let's run for something alum.
I'll give you my hot take here, which is the fine folk at Courier were kind enough to let me guest rate For What It's Worth a couple months ago, and I dug into some data on like basically reach and engagement of like political brand accounts, and like the TLDR there is like, with like one or two exceptions, there's basically no left of center organization that's like reaching anyone on social media at any type of scale. And like so to basically be like, is there any organization that's good at doing that? The answer is no. And like you're just, the data is like actually quite clear on that, and like you're better off investing in creators who are reaching people and building relationships with them and engaging them. And like that's just like, sure, there's like qualitatively some organization who sometimes have good tweets, but like they're not actually reaching people at scale, and the data is like super duper clear about that. So don't worry too much about your own brand account, engage with creators instead.
And do you have a creator recommendation?
Oh God, the most fun one we did at the White House that like was the one I got yelled at the most ahead of time, but then everyone liked the product, was the kids that go around and hand digital cameras to people. I don't know if you guys have seen those TikToks, but like they were actually like really great to work with and like produced a really good product. And they're all like 22, so that was fun. Like fun film. They're good, check them out.
And Victor?
I don't actually have a favorite political creator per se. I think so many are amazing, but something I've really been more into being on sort of like more local side of things is seeing the political creators who are filling the void of the decline of sort of traditional media and big papers and local towns. Like what are those type of accounts who are giving people that information that you would normally read in like the LA Times or like just like a local paper. So in LA there's one called LA Taco that does great work on immigration and just what's going on with that. And I will say someone who's doing it well ran for office, or announced his run for office yesterday, James Talarico in Texas.
Yeah.
Talking about things that Democrats you don't hear a lot from Democrats. His ad was just 3 minutes long, talking about like why he's in it, his religious background, economic populism. He's really talented. I like him a lot.
And that's our panel. Thank you, everybody.
In this next panel, titled Just Be Normal, we have some of the internet's best at doing exactly that, being normal and authentic and human and breaking through. So join me in welcoming our panelists, Suzanne Lambert, comedian and content creator, Gabriella, digital strategy advisor, Nicole Dunger, the vice president of growth for People First, and our moderator, Caleb Hughes, the host of How Is This Better?
I feel really lucky to be here with these three women, and I have a lot of questions for them. In an effort to be normal, I will just break the ice. I'm wearing Crocs because I just moved here. I wouldn't usually wear Crocs to something like this. In any case, so now that that's out of the way, I want to talk about being normal. And I think that for some people sounds really broad, so I'd like to narrow it. So I guess we can talk about, there's so much going on. The way that people post on the internet is very authentic, it's true to yourself. And so I guess if we can go down a line, I'll start with you, Gabi, talking about what, I guess, posting in a normal way in this current sort of media ecosystem where we have consultants, overriding what does seem normal and does seem to be working, what that looks like to you and, how you participate in that.
Hi, I'm Gabi Zutrau. I am a full-time independent digital strategy advisor for organizations and campaigns like Move On and the Mamdani campaign. I recently built out their chatbot infrastructure using a tool called ManyChat. And in a very, very different lane, I am also a dog-fluencer. My dog is very famous. Edna the Runt Edna the Runt, if anybody wants to look her up. And I use her platforms to experiment with new tools and tactics that I'm interested in before I try them with my clients, including ManyChat. But the question is...
About being normal and authenticity.
Well, kind of a funny question because I pretend to be a dog all day on the internet. But, I think that authenticity is sort of something that is built through consistency over time. And I feel like your audience can feel that even if it is theatrical, like being a dog on the internet, or if it is political and you've just been saying the same things and had the same political stance for a really long time, and now you're using all the internet best practices to make sure that that message is getting to your audience and feels authentic.
Okay. Wow, they work now. Okay, Nicole, you're next.
Thank you. I think that being normal online is actually quite challenging for most people. I think a good portion of everybody probably in this room, if you're not a content creator, you might consume a lot online, but the thought of actively posting on your Instagram regularly can be pretty fearful because being authentic, it's like, what does that even mean on Instagram? I'm taking a photo that is perfectly lit. I'm spending 30 minutes to be like, what do I even put in this caption? To just put one emoji. Like being your own authentic self online is a really big challenge. I heard someone say before, like, you have to just be willing to climb cringe mountain. Like, you have to just be willing to just like go for it and be not fearful of what that looks like. So commend everybody who does that, because in my personal life, I am the person who posts like 3 times a year and sits there debating what my caption should be forever. So I love to work on the back end of influencer marketing to be like, yes, girl, do your thing, and not have to necessarily do it myself.
Hi, so good to see everyone. I'm Suzanne Lambert. I'm a content creator and comedian, so my angle to certain conversations online is a little different. But I would say for me, authenticity is about, one, for me, playing to my strengths, and 2, things that I enjoy. So playing to my strengths for me, I'm really good at talking shit. Like that, it is a strength that, was not rewarded in corporate America, right? I worked full-time in finance up until February when I was able to do this full-time, which I'm so, fortunate to be able to do. That's not a skill that necessarily is looked at as a positive thing. And I remember thinking, like, I know that I could channel this thing that I actually think could be used for good. And that's kind of how my platform started, as the Regina George liberal. And I try to, make content where I feel like I can add a perspective. I think what we're really good on the left is informing, not so much entertaining. And there's value in both, right? We need the people talking about the headlines and the policies and all of that. But I think we also need people like me who can be more of a stepping stone, and that's where I see myself fitting in the ecosystem. Like, I should not be your last stop about Medicare. Please don't let me be. But I can at least maybe get people more interested in politics who were not before. So for me, that's really what it's about.
Amazing. Also, I just want to give Nicole an opportunity to introduce herself.
I'm Nicole Dunger. I'm the VP of Growth and Partner at People First. We're an influencer agency that recruits everyday individuals into the influencer space, encourages them to talk about the issues and the causes that they care most about, in partnership with organizations who are doing God's work behind the scenes every single day.
Perfect. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about Gavin Newsom, because we've all seen the posts. I think we're all aware of the fact that he is, I heard hot. Sure. Yes, okay, well, in addition to that, my mic is a little wonk, so I'm gonna, thank you, Gabby. Okay, so in any case, Gavin Newsom is posting directly in the same style as Donald Trump. It's picking up a lot of traction on both the left and right. New York Magazine declared this the summer of Gavin Newsom, which, tight. But I guess I'm curious, like, what you all think, what you're making of this sort of strategy, and I think more interestingly, like, how should other Democrats model their fight after what he's doing. I mean, I think what's resonating with people is him sort of calling out the elephant in the room, right? Which is like, it's strange that an adult man posts like this on the internet. So yeah, I mean, what are you all thinking about it?
I think the first thing is that, yes, it's Gavin and he is approving everything, but really he hired the right social media manager, and she is doing all of that amazing work. But I think it's interesting because now everybody's talking about him. Mm-hmm. He's playing into what we all like to see, which is entertainment. Whether or not you like Gavin Newsom, whether or not this will turn itself into votes, but you know, about a year ago, people really didn't like Gavin Newsom, and now they kind of like him or do like him. So I think it seems to be having a positive effect on a person who we all know is like wants to be president one day. So I think it's something worth learning from. But again, I think the key is hiring the right social media manager in that case.
I think it works because I do think it is who he actually is as a person, right? And I feel like online commentary agrees. Other politicians, if they were to mimic that strategy, it wouldn't work, and we've seen it flop, right? Like, you know, holding a baseball bat, for example. Like, I don't think we need to be doing that necessarily. I also don't think we need to see politicians doing like fit checks or TikTok dances. I don't need to see my senator like doing the renegade. I just don't. It does nothing for me. So I think like Gavin and his team are playing to his strengths and are playing to who he actually is. And I think that matters more than having like the splashiest strategy, because people can tell that it's real, you know, in the way that he speaks.
That's so interesting, because I think two things about this. The first is that I think this is what happens when you encourage a culture of experimentation on your team, and you give the reins to the people who are best positioned to do that experimentation online. And then the second thing that I think about this is that Democrats try really hard to not upset their corporate donors, and they haven't really been able to stand behind good policies that their base agrees with for a really long time. And so their policies and politics aren't doing the talking and the convincing for them. So they have to resort to tactics like this that kind of continue to help perpetuate the brand that they are the foil to the MAGA guys and to Trump. And it's doing a good job, and it's a way to engage your base for sure. But I think I don't find it that authentic personally. Yeah,
I feel that. I guess I want to talk a little bit about the consultant speech or consultant speak, right? Where they're weighing in on, you know, or reining in those moments where people are starting to like pick up an audience. I think we all remember Tim Walz calling the other side weird, and that becoming a moment that everyone was like, yes, like it was like the emperor has no clothes, we're finally there. And then suddenly that was no longer the tactic, and we saw the nicest debate we've ever seen where everyone was just best friends. And ultimately it didn't help. And so I'm just curious, like, how do we banish that? How do we get to a place where people feel more comfortable in the first place just saying this thing is weird? Or have you all noticed that? And I think that you all have different perspectives on that, given where you post and what your vibe is. But yeah, how do we not make that mistake again?
I wish someone could tell me. I feel like every day working in the influencer space, especially being the go-between a lot of influencers and the clients that we work with, we're often trying to be that buffer and that filter of like, we understand the policy communication that you're trying to get across, but like you got like you said, like hand over the reins and like be comfortable in that experimentation, because it does work in a lot of ways, and it might flop and it might not be great, but ultimately like we all live in this new media landscape that requires some sort of attention grabbing, requires some interest, some entertainment. I mean, American politics has been entertainment forever. It's just now entertainment in a new format, and we have to just start to get ourselves comfortable with it. The only thing I can say is like, unfortunately, you should maybe spend more time online. Like the weird comment, you know, that clearly is just somebody being like authentic and just speaking without total recognition of a camera, which is what makes everything on TikTok, or when TikTok first became like popular, was the whole thing, is that nothing had a filter on it. It was just like funsies, little videos and stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, there's a fascist in the White House. I don't care about being nice. I feel like that's the attitude of most of the country. And for me personally, I double down. Like if people say this is mean, I'm like, yeah, it's meant to be. Like I don't try to apologize. I don't try to, like make them happy. Like I'm like, yes, it's supposed to be mean, and if you don't like it, unfollow me, which weirdly makes people follow me. And I actually have a lot of conservatives who follow me, and moderates who are like, I don't really agree with anything you say, and I don't really like you, but I think you're funny. And that's a first step, right? Like I grew up, and I've shared this very, online very transparently, but I grew up super conservative, very conservative hometown, law to own a gun, like literally, it's the law in Kennesaw, you can look it up. And I talk about that, and I tell stories, and I don't make sweeping statements about Republicans. Like I try to be like, yeah, I understand why you feel the way you do, because I was you once, but here's what made me change my mind. And I have had people tell me, like, you were kind of the first person who didn't talk to me, or you talked to me in a way that I hadn't really heard before. But I think being mean to bad people is a good thing. My mom always said, don't start a fight, but you can finish it. And I think we need to finish it.
Yeah, on that note, I feel like politicians have so much to learn from creators in general, but I think also, as far as banishing consultant speak, we have a real tendency in politics to just way over message test everything. And I saw this a lot in 2024, and just like as a creator who does brand deals, it's very undermining to creators' abilities and like anyone's ability to like make them follow a script and like very, very closely follow the wording that you want them to use, because they resonate with their audience because they know what resonates with their audience. And like, yeah, we definitely need to move past asking the creators to read message tested scripts, but I think we're all kind of coming to terms with that.
I want to add to that really quick about consultant speak. So I've never worked in politics. I would still consider myself kind of middle of the road as far as my knowledge, like how much I know. But, people will say things like cloture. The average American doesn't know what that means. I still don't know what that means, right? I've even told people, they won't say what city they represent, they'll have their district. The average American doesn't know what congressional district they're in. Hot take, I don't think they should have to necessarily. Like, we have to explain like I'm 5 more.
And also give you the space to be speaking as though you're 5. Like not judgment on that.
Totally.
We can communicate in that way, and it's totally chill.
Yeah.
Totally. All right, so this question is for Gabi. Your innovative work with tools like ManyChat, an Instagram-based chatbot for anybody who's not familiar, helped the digital strategy for Zoran here in New York. It seems to be going very well for that campaign. So how do you ensure authenticity is still at the center of online interactions, even when they may be powered a little bit by AI?
I think the first thing is that I would never encourage anyone to use a bot and act like they're not using a bot. Yeah. Like my first message in every bot flow, I hope is probably going to be something along the lines of, hey, we can't get to every message, so we send this automated message like, do you want to come canvas, phone bank, or donate? So I think it's pretty, at least the tech is not there yet that we can really just copy paste someone's personality and thoughts and
thank God
perspectives, thank God, like into a bot that's going to respond a way you can always rely on. And I wouldn't recommend, I don't think AI is there. I don't know if it's going to get there, but it probably will. And if it does, I just think that is creepy. And like we should be acknowledging that we're like using this technology not to trick people into interacting with a bot that approximates us, but to be like, we're using this to scale up our ability to bring you into the fold, to have that person-to-person organizing experience offline, to get you to like have your leadership developed by your neighbors and develop other people's leadership. That's what organizing is. And these technologies, I think when they're used the best, are used to take people at scale and put them into those situations, not to necessarily like talk to them and give them advice and talk about your platform. I don't think we're there yet, and it would creep me out if we were.
Okay, so this next one is for Nicole. Both parties invited hundreds of creators to their conventions in 2024, which I think really solidified that like influencers are here to stay, at least in modern politics. How do you think candidate and party relationships with influencers are going to change ahead of 2026?
Yeah, I think, like you said, it definitely solidified it. I think even Kamala Harris going on Call Her Daddy was like, okay, we're trying, we're dipping our toe in the water, we're seeing what that environment, it felt more like, let's see what that environment is like and test it out. I think there's still a long ways to go in the space. I think coming out of the election, it seemed like everybody was like, we should have done more influencer. And I'm like, we were here, we were saying. But I think it really comes down, like the further development is going to be in those like relationships that they establish with the influencers who they partner with. I think a big piece of it is like we've all, hopefully everyone in this room has all canvassed once upon a time or phone banked. Like we've done community grassroots building. Social media is that same space. So taking that sort of energy to the creators that you decide to partner with, that these are your organizers, these are people who are speaking your message to their community, and go beyond just maybe like influencers who are always talking about politics. Maybe think about like a teacher in Wisconsin or like a nurse in Minnesota. Like think about these other avenues that you can just bring community together versus just thinking about it as though it's another like media placement or another ad buy. Like this is your true grassroots community just in a new space.
Yeah, wow. It's a great point. This final question is for Suzanne. So you've interviewed many older established Democratic reps and senators for your Instagram, for your TikTok. Do you feel like you've been able to get them to loosen up? And what's been challenging about working with them?
Honestly, yes. What I find interesting is when I get pushback about topics or the way I approach content, because I'm very forthcoming about that, it's usually from their staff. So I can think of an example with a congressman, and they always reach out to me. Like I'm not usually going to them. So I assume they're kind of familiar with the content that I do and my approach. And I got to their office, like, well, you can't do this, you can't say this, you can't say this. And I was like, look, I'll just bounce. Because like that's not what if you want just like a normal political interview, it's just like not what I do. It's not what I'm good at. They were like, okay, it's fine. And then the congressman was like ready to go, answering questions, talked about how we'd gotten into credit card debt, got very vulnerable. But I try to tell them up front at the interview, I'm like, look, I want you to look good. I'm doing this interview because I like you. I'm not objective and unbiased. I am, I have an agenda, I do. If you want to shoot it over, we can. If you want to start over, I think they're nervous because they're like, are they going to trick me? Are they going to pull a fast one on me? Because people do that on our side, more so than you would think. And I try to just be very upfront and like acknowledge those concerns. And honestly, it has not been a problem for me. But I'll also like tell them, like, I don't like how you said that. Can you say it like this? Because I'm trying to make them look good. Like I'll tell them like, oh, you should say this. This would be funny. Yeah.
Okay, they did tell me that we were short on time, but I'm sorry, I have one more question for everyone, because I'm curious just from my own perspective. So the right-wing media ecosystem online is very coordinated. Their messaging is all on the exact same page, the exact same tone. In a world where we like things to be more diverse in terms of messaging, in terms of who's giving that message, how do you all feel that the left is doing? And if you had any critiques or hopes for the future for us, what would you say we should start doing? Your eyes.
My eyes. Yeah, I mean, we have just fallen so far behind, and we need to claw back a lot of ceded online territory that we have given to the right, and I think part of that, like, is, you know, hiring people like you to
hire me
to make good content, but part of it is also like having creators Trojan horse in worldview ideas, the way that the Mormon Church is doing it with trad wives, like making sure that the content that our side is pushing out and funding and interacting with is consistent and has one worldview, or not, you know, a variety of worldviews, but one that's like not fascist. And yeah, I mean, that's just the beginning. Like, we need to be really, really building, and I think a lot of people have been putting a lot of energy into building out the left's media ecosystem, but like really way too late for what we're in right now, and we just got to keep moving on it.
I totally agree, especially with the Trojan horse, because I think people think if we want to see more real and relatable, and there's nothing wrong with this, but oh, that means I have to talk about politics while I do my makeup. You can actually just do your makeup, or you can actually just show your workout. I did a video that went super viral yesterday talking about homecoming dresses, right? And there's a lot of Southern mamas on there who I know are Republican who followed me because of that, right? Like, talk like a normal person, because in your normal day-to-day life, you wouldn't only talk about politics. So try to I think variation is super important, and mixing up what you talk about, because you want them to like, it's like you want them to like you because of one thing, and then stay around and then hear the political views. It's not always that they're gonna love your political views right off the bat.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, with the right, their messaging is very coordinated, very planned. Everybody's saying the same things, but they're all saying it in their own tone of voice. Like, my anti-fascist story might be different than your anti-fascist story, than your anti-fascist story. Like, the way that we communicate is gonna be different. Yeah. So as long as we can just put but I think there's a lot of work to be done on the back end of us understanding what our message even is. And then once we get that together, I think spreading that information around, being really aligned behind a couple of things, and then allowing people with different life views, different perspectives to say that message in their own way that appeals to their own community. Again, it's just true grassroots organizing.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Well, I want to thank you all so much for being here. If you're not familiar with their work, get familiar with it. And I appreciate you all just spending the time with me. Thank you again, everyone.
I'm going to introduce our final conversation of the night, and it is an incredibly special one. Our final conversation is with Deja Foxx, the subject of the Courier-produced docuseries that inspired this entire evening. This past year, yeah, we can give a round of applause for that. This past year, Courier and their Arizona arm followed Deja behind the scenes in her inspirational and viral race for a congressional seat in Arizona. Tonight, we're going to show you a preview of that docuseries, Represent, and that will be followed by a fireside chat with Tara McGowan, the founder of Courier, and Deja Foxx herself.
They got the endorsement. They got all that. He's got the money, but I've got the moment. You're the AOC of the race. Thank you. I appreciate you. No, I'm gonna cry. It just feels so special to have so many people showing up for me.
Establishment Democrats are putting their thumb on the scale in my race.
It's no secret that I don't look like the other folks on this stage or in Congress, and that's because I'm not.
It's hard to run for office, and that's by design. If you don't have decades of DC connections for your dad's fundraising list, it's even harder.
I'm in this fight because people like me, families like mine, have the most to lose if nothing changes.
I am willing to fight for the potential of young people because they deserve to have someone who's going to fight for their future. They are failing not only to embrace leadership that could build our bench, but really trying to box me out.
Adelaida Grijalva has won the Democratic primary to succeed her father, the late Congressman Raul Grijalva.
The Gen Z candidate actually lost. That's Deja Foxx. So what's the bigger picture here for Democrats?
welcome Deja and Tara.
Oh my goodness, there's so many familiar faces in here. It's like a family reunion. Hey guys.
Can we give it up one more time for Deja Foxx, please? And thanks so much everyone for being here. This has been a really great event. So this, Deja, is your very first public event and appearance since the campaign ended just 57 days ago.
Is that all?
Which sounds short until we talk about how long your campaign actually was. But first and foremost, how are you doing? And how have you been processing everything that you went through the last 57 days?
Yeah, I mean, results came in on July 15th. And this was a race that began April 2nd for me. In total, it was 104 days. And I sprinted really hard. I went from filing paperwork alone in my bedroom, having no staff, days where I raised less than $140 and didn't have enough money to hire a campaign manager, let alone organizers, to raising something like $40,000 a day and crossing the finish line on $1 million in the span of 100 days. There was 1 week in that campaign where I put 1,200 miles on my car, driving from Tucson, which is my hometown, up to Phoenix, down onto small towns like Ajo, Arizona that have just a few hundred people living there, border cities like Nogales and Yuma, and I gave it 110%, and I wouldn't have done it differently. But in this aftermath, I feel like I'm standing at the top of a mountain. I did the thing that ever since I was a kid, I wanted to do. And what a blessing it is to say that, right? There's so many people that never get to realize those dreams. But I carry a lot of responsibility with me now. I've built an audience of hundreds of thousands of people who are looking to me for what's next. Not just for me personally, but for us, for them. And I wanted to make sure that I took my time to come back to this so that way I could give them the best answer possible.
And you have been inspiring from the very beginning. I remember being in the conference room with you when you first told me that you were going to run, and I literally squealed. I had goosebumps because you are such an inspiration. You keep inspiring folks. And for the record, her campaign was 104 days start to finish. Kamala Harris's was 107. So these were unbelievable sprints, and you accomplished so much in that short period of time. And it wasn't all roses by any means, and I don't mean just the outcome. You gave us a great privilege at Courier at actually following your race very closely. You guys saw a little bit of it. Shameless plug, you can watch all of the episodes of Represent and really watch some of the most intimate and hard moments I think that you went through from the campaign. Talk a little bit about that, like the really unvarnished parts of this, and what was really hard and how you are sort of alchemizing those moments and those experiences now.
Yeah, I made a commitment that when I got into this race, I did it with the intention of winning. I knew there was a path to victory there for me. But I've also worked campaigns in the past where I know that we have to change how we measure our wins. And I got into this not knowing if I'd win at the ballot box, but knowing that every single day I was gonna stack up a win, right? Whether it was the mom who stopped me on the street and asked me to explain to her daughter what we were doing, or the thousands of people who DM'd me online that said that they were interested in running for office or felt hopeful or inspired in a time where we cannot take that for granted. And so being able to be in community in that way, find those wins, is what kept me going on the really hard days. I have never been told no so many times in my life. It was an exposure therapy like none other. And, this is a bit of a zoom forward, but every day I woke up with so much clarity about what I could do to make the world better today. And in the aftermath of this campaign, I missed that clarity. I would do all of the hard work, That's the easy part, the hard work. The harder part is not knowing where we go from here. And so my hardest day was not losing the campaign, but trying to figure out what we do next.
Yeah, and I want to talk about some of those moments because the Democratic Party, I'm sure this has been topical all night and in people's conversations and lives the past number of months, but it is going through a real identity crisis, and I think an overdue reckoning, and I don't know where it's going to come out, and I don't know necessarily that it matters, but your campaign in particular was a microcosm where a lot of these debates and conversations that are happening nationally were playing out. Conversations about the establishment versus disruptors, old versus new. I mean, literally, you were running to fill the open seat that a legendary progressive congressman who died while serving in office. So the age and the gerontocracy was topical. You were running against a candidate that was quickly embraced and endorsed by the state and national party, and so you really were actually experiencing this tension that we're all feeling and we're all talking about. And Democrats have the lowest approval rating they've ever had in history right now, and it kills me that you didn't have longer, but also we're about to see primaries and primary challengers like you who are brave and bold and bringing fresh ideas and experiences into the conversation all over this country next year. And so I'm curious, how were you confronted by the establishment, and what was that experience like?
I knew this was going to be hard from the day I got in, right? I had no illusions about how difficult it would be to run a 100-day race against the daughter of a former congressman. But I got into it not thinking about who would be my endorsers and who would line up behind me, but really thinking about the teenager who got into this work. I've been doing this for a decade. I'm 25 years old. But when I was 15, I started organizing around sex education. 16 years old, I went viral for the first time, standing up to my senator who was trying to defund the Planned Parenthood centers where I got care. And when I thought about how much this campaign would mean to those 15, 16-year-old girls out there right now, who have watched as Donald Trump has taken office again, broken every fucking rule in the book, I think this is her Democratic Party just as much as it belongs to any senator or party official. This is a party that belongs to our voters, to families like mine who live in Section 8 housing, who rely on food stamps, just as much it belongs to our donors. And I wanted to lay bare those systems questions. Why is it that we see so few young working class people in office or even running? And every day I got to do that. From when I filed my paperwork and had to self-dox, right? My address is now publicly available in the domain. How many young women will that keep from ever running, right? From when I started calling through my contacts list, doing call time for the first time. When I am the friend and family member, everybody calls for money, right? I am a first-generation American, the first of my family to go to college. To even some of my very own consultants joking that if I kept up this rate, I might raise $1 million, right? And proving to them that if we did things differently, if we embraced different strategies, right? If we came online and gave people an authentic message with a messenger who could carry it because I have lived it, that we would build strategies that would make it easier for young working class people to run after me. To get specific on this question about the identity of the Democratic Party, I think we asked a big question about who does it belong to, and it was a message that resonated, and whether they take those lessons or not is neither here nor there, but this is how campaigns will run in the future, and there is no better thing to be in this moment than an outsider.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think it's a matter of time. There is a clinging to norms that no longer are actually effective and they aren't popular.
Yeah, those emails you get that are like, please, $1, I promise, is gonna win us this campaign. We know that things like that have actually built distrust in young people, in working class families, right? And we're alienating the people who have always shown up for us. And we've got to do things differently. And campaigns like mine, primaries like these, and safe blue districts are where we get to experiment with those strategies. And anyone who says differently is either short-sighted or self-interested.
That's absolutely right. And you said you wouldn't do a single thing differently. That was going to be my question. So you took it out. What, if anything, would you do differently? But you also said something I really, really, really want you to expand on, which is, what does winning look like now? And something that we talk about a lot at Courier, in our state newsrooms and national, is obviously, of course, the power of narrative and the power of information to shape people. But also, we built Courier to encourage more people to vote. That's still obviously important, but that's really under threat. And what we're up against is not playing by any of the rules or the norms, even as some of the Democrats in the party cling to theirs that are outdated. And I think that we do have to collectively redefine what winning means, what fighting means, beyond just sort of elections and electoral work. And as somebody who literally has been an activist almost all of your life, I really am feeling this desire where it's like we have to actually create more activists. We have to encourage and support that. And I would love to hear you sort of expand on, as you're processing and thinking about what you're doing next personally, which I hope does continue to involve rest and break from this. But how are you thinking about what fighting and winning need to look like right now?
Yeah. We hear this word fight everywhere, and that's because the consultants are letting them know that it's messaging really well. Like, we want fighters, but what does that actually look like? I got my start not in electoral politics, but grassroots organizing, showing up to school board meetings and demanding that the Republicans and the Democrats on that board update a curriculum that hadn't been updated since the 80s. Because I was homeless in high school, and I didn't have parents at home to fill in the gaps. I fought with my story. I didn't have a fancy title or donors or, a degree. I showed up to these town halls, to these open mic community calls, armed with my experience, knowing that I was an expert in my experience and that my elected officials worked for me. And every day I'm confronted with the question, right? Hundreds of thousands of people follow me online. The majority of them are young women younger than me, 24 or under. And I carry with a lot of responsibility the message that I send to them about what it means to be in this work, to be in this fight, and what fighting can look like, because I know that it will not be running for office for everybody. I was a part of that 2016 girl boss bubble where they're like, yes, queen, she should run. And I'm like, and dox yourself, and there's so many things nobody told me before I ran about the ways my life would be different and the ways that this would be really, really hard. And so I am of the mind that the best thing I can be with those young women is honest, and to help them find the place where they uniquely can get involved, whether they are a photographer, and these are all things I saw in my campaign, who volunteers their time, right, to show up to an event where we couldn't afford a photographer and snap some pics. Or the college student who helped us out on video editing from Texas, right? These are the ways that they can find to put their unique skills to use. And it has everything to do with relationships, with connecting and saying that the skill that you uniquely have, the story that only you can tell, has a place. And we are in a time where everybody needs to take up that sense of responsibility. It is the only way we will get out of this. And the thing that I was really proud of in a culture change moment on my campaign, I would do these walk and talk videos where I would hike this hill that I walk every morning. I'd flip the camera around and I would just talk about something that was going on in the campaign. And I did one on fundraising where I told them, if everyone who watched these videos actually gave $1, and I don't mean like the blast they send on presidential campaigns, but truly, if everyone who watched it gave $1, we would be done fundraising, right? And it took quite a few videos, a lot of conversations, but bringing people in and telling them that your small action has collective power is something that this administration does not want us to believe. They don't want us to trust each other, that if I show up, you'll show up too. And because we were able to foster that on that campaign, 99% of our donors were small dollar donors. $1 million raised in 100 days, 99% from small dollar donors. These are teachers who don't have an extra $10, single moms. You know, people would send me messages letting me know that they're barely making rent, but they cashed in their coin jar to be in this fight with us. And it wasn't because they were sure we could win. It was because they needed something to believe in. They needed a fighter. And my fight looks different than theirs, but it's not less important. So if I had a call to action for everyone here, it would be to ask, what is the thing that you can uniquely do? Who can you have a conversation with in your local community about where you can put it to best use? And I think that's how we're gonna get out of this.
Absolutely, and your story is so powerful, but you also know how to share your story, which is not comfortable for everybody or easy or natural. And certainly for folks that have been in politics for a really long time and of older generations, it's really not native to them. And unfortunately, authenticity is not native to a lot of folks, and they didn't have to be, right? Because there was a reward system in place for actually the less you share, the more manufactured you present yourself, the more support you'll get, and that is the inverse today, right? It really is the more authentic you are, but there are still barriers to that. And you have been, I mean, you are obviously a digital native as I am, having grown up on the internet and on social media, and really knowing how to leverage it to build power. And to get narratives across. And I'm curious, you know, we could talk about the tactics, et cetera, but no one needs to know that, because for you it wasn't tactics, it's literally how you live your life and how you build community and power. But how do you think that social media is changing who gets to or who will get to have space in the political discourse?
Yeah, I mean, the very first viral video I had, like I said, when I was 16, I showed up to this town hall with my then Senator, Jeff Flake, a Republican, who had voted to strip Title X funding from Planned Parenthood centers. That was the funding I relied on, like I said, when I was homeless, when I was working at a gas station. I walked into a Planned Parenthood with no money, no parents, and no insurance, and I left with the birth control I needed to take control of my body and my future, and he wanted to take it away. And I showed up at his town hall. I waited 45 minutes in line to ask a question that is not in the video. And when I did, I asked why he, as a middle-aged white man, would make these decisions about me and my body. And he told me he supported policies that support the American dream, which, as somebody who has now been a candidate, I'm like, who told you to say that? Like, please, there's like actually someone, a human being that you are accountable to in front of you. And I asked him why he would deny me the American dream. If birth control is helping me to be successful, reach for higher education. And he said, thank you. And I said, no, thank you. And I woke up the next day and something like 17 million people had seen the video. My life went from private to public overnight. I was live on CNN that day. Shortly after, I went to DC for the very first time, lobbied on Capitol Hill, sat across from members of Congress, senators, rooms that people like my mom, the single mom that raised me, would never have had access to. And it taught me a really important lesson, which was that social media was a tool that I could use to be on even footing in the public discourse as a 16-year-old girl experiencing homelessness, working at the gas station with a United States senator. And I've committed myself to that question over the last decade of how do we use the tools at hand to change who gets to have political power, change who gets to take up space in the public discourse. And this campaign was no different. I showed what it meant to not have a legacy last name, to not get your dad's donor list, and to build a viable campaign despite it, because we connected people. We thought about the relationships, that those 100 million views we racked up on campaign content were people. Every share was a conversation started in their family group chat. Every save was someone who wanted to come back to a moment that made them feel hopeful. And it is that organizer background married with smart digital strategy that I've carried with me to make this possible. And you know, though we didn't win at the ballot box in my particular race, they were very particular circumstances. I want to be clear, I beat a guy who had already run for Congress. This was a 5-person race. I came in second. Not only that, but I got more votes than the Republican candidate who's running in the general election right now, right? And there are systems problems we have to address. But as a party, we need to be invested in the people who are invested in this party and building the strategies that are going to take us forward. Because clearly what we have been doing is not working. And the people who got us into this mess are not going to be the ones who get us out. And you know, every day I'm grateful for the run that we had because we were able to prove the point, even if we didn't win at the ballot box.
Absolutely. And things are really dark right now, and it is really hard to find hope in spaces, and your campaign, and you are a source of hope for me, and I know for so many others, and other folks that are running and that are taking on the hard system and putting themselves out there and in the arena. And yet, you know, we're really clear-eyed, right? Yeah. It is not normal times right now, and times are getting darker, and they're going to get darker and worse. So where is your well of hope right now?
Yeah, things are hard. And I often ask myself, you know, if my target audience, the person I create for, is this version of my teenage self, right? This 15-year-old who's showing up to school board meetings, who's working at the gas station, how do I ask her in good faith to be a part of this work when every day we see political violence? When I know how dangerous it can be to do this work, and when there were moments where I felt deeply unsupported by the very same people who should have embraced me. And in some ways, the answer is because we have to. That families like mine don't get to choose every day if they wake up and live a political life or not. Like, my mom's access to housing and healthcare and food, my neighbors who I've known for decades, right, my whole life who babysat me, it is their access to the things they need to just get by that is on the line. And so this is not some vanity project. These aren't just talking points. These are the things people like me and my family live every day. And so the sense of responsibility I have is about the people I know and I love. And if we all get to know our communities a little bit better, if we foster that sense of responsibility to each other and we take action that only we can take, right? Apply our unique skills, I really do believe that we can get out of this. And now that being said, I'm not above waking up and feeling hopeless. I had days during the campaign and after where I wanted to scream from the rooftops that, oh my God, guys, we're cooked. The closer I got to power, the more I met the people that were supposed to fix this, the more worried I have become. And that's not funny, but it's true. But the more I met people on the campaign trail who had never shown up to a political event but came and knocked doors for us in Yuma, right? The more I would get DMs from these people who barely were making it by but wanted to pitch in $1 just to be a part of it. Those are the people that make me feel hopeful. And I am in the unique position that I have coalesced hundreds of thousands of them around me, and they are my well of hope in the same way that I am theirs. And I think that is the reminder we have to have right now, is that we belong to each other. And it makes me want to cry. Because the systems feel so big, and it feels like we're playing with a toddler who keeps changing the rules on us. But what it means to show up for your neighbors are my first organizing memories. Like, yes, I was a 15-year-old organizer, but also organizing is being raised by the single mom and having your neighbor come over to babysit while she's at work, or inviting someone over for a meal when they're short on food, or the people who drove me to school when we didn't have a car. That is organizing. And we're not going to change the systems things overnight, but we can make our lives a little better along the way. And the work really is to just make sure that we get through this. So my well of hope is at home, and it is in my relationships, and it is in the way that I belong to the people who belong to me.
Somebody who that's their motivation, that's the type of person I want to be in elected office, and I want leading. And we just need more of you. And I am not going to put you on the spot and ask you the question everybody's thinking, because you need time and rest. I am not. But thank you for letting us help share your story even wider. Thank you for coming tonight and hanging out. And thank you for being such an inspiring and courageous leader.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I want to take a minute to thank our sponsors once again, the Grassroots Analytics, People First, and The Bench for making this evening possible. And I want to thank all of you for spending this evening with us. The political climate feels really scary and really overwhelming and frankly terrifying, but tonight we got to hear from some of the people facing that head on and kind of leading the fight, coming up with innovative and new and engaging ways to talk to people online in their communities and organize. And the mission of Courier is to tell those stories, not just in this room, but online in their newsletters, in their podcasts. So if you don't follow them on socials, please do. Thanks for being here.